Welcome to another exciting edition of Plank of the Week, the most successful television show in the history of talk radio because, of course, it's the only television show we do here at Talk Radio, but it is very successful. People look forward to it, and I'm delighted to say that Patrick Christys is back with us, man about town, broadcaster, journalist, soon to be legal eagle, I hear, as well.
Oh, yes,
but we'll come up with that later on. Madeline Grant is here as well, of course, also columnist at the Sunday Telegraph. Welcome. I guess we better get to it. Patrick, what's your first nomination?
So my first nomination is a lady by the name of Natasha Bouchard, who is the Calais mayor in France. Now, Natasha Bouchard presumably comes from quite a long line of garlic-wearing, chateau-dwelling, cheese-crunching surrender merchants. Right. However, despite that, she has decided that she wants to declare maritime war against the Brits for us sending our navy into patrol the channel. I thought they'd already done that by sending all these dinghies over, to be honest. Well, this is it. Well, so you know, I hope she's...
That was a reconnaissance.
Yeah, but I hope she's got a giant maritime crane, actually, because she's going to need to winch most of the French navy off the bottom of the sea after we have to sink them all, given their inglorious retreat from the Nazis. So,
well, hang on, aren't we supposed to be in some kind of joint Air Force Navy with them now, because none of us have got enough money to actually have our own?
Well, probably, yes. But I like the fact that if we went to maritime war with the French, they currently can't stop, the entire might of the French Navy can't stop a few dinghies from crossing the channel. So presumably if we just sailed at them with force, they'd guide us ashore, move us on into Spain and tell the Spanish that we're their problem now.
Yes, I guess that's what they would do. But I mean, you know, I suppose the mayor of Calais has got pretty good reason not to like the Brits, because, you know, the people of Calais have been subjected for years to people coming over on the cheap to just buy a load of wine and pâté at the local Carrefour, get back on the ferry and bugger off home.
Yeah, that's true. But, I mean, to be honest with you, it comes on top of this for me, which is, you know, Britain, they're doing a very good job now portraying Britain as this really racist nation. Now, I disagree with that fundamentally on account of the fact that we're just not.
And also because of the fact that all these people want to come here.
Well, yeah, that's it. But also the fact is that I would argue that actually it's the EU or the French who are indeed being quite cavalier with the lives of a lot of these people. You're allowing them to pass through various countries, safe countries, and then get into quite unsafe dinghies and then sail across the channel, which is the busiest shipping lane in the world. I would argue that if you cared more about the lives of those migrants, you maybe would do more to accommodate them there as opposed to passing them over here. Although, of course, you do feel deeply sorry for anyone who is genuinely fleeing terror.
Well, you do, absolutely. But it is a massive problem. And I mean, funnily enough, I was down in Sussex on the coast just last weekend, and it was so still that you could have thought you were looking at the Serpentine. I mean, literally there was no waves at all, there was no wind, and it's no wonder that they come, because actually in those conditions it's probably not that dangerous.
But I think this is part of it for me, which is, so we have a net migration of 270,000 every single year. We also have about 150,000 annually of undocumented migrants, I suppose. So the idea now that we're being some kind of really unholy nation by maybe not being as welcoming as we potentially could be to these people is just not true, because we are, frankly, already accommodating them and everything. And again, I do feel really sorry for these people if they are genuinely fleeing something. But at the same time, there are legal channels to go through and stuff like that. So it is a bit of a tightrope, really.
To me, it's kind of a question of sort of head over heart battle. Because the heart says, this looks bad. We feel desperately sad for the people who are in danger, and mostly, as you say, it's comparatively safer, I guess, to cross the channel. So mostly they do survive, but in the Mediterranean, it can be very dangerous, and thousands of people die every year.
For sure.
So you feel terribly for them, but at the same time, I suppose that the worthy sort of left-wing approach is to say, well, we can just give everyone asylum, we can take in everyone who makes it over here. And of course that sets up terrible incentives. This is where the head has to come in here. The people who benefit from this are often people traffickers, because if it's very obvious that if people make it across the channel that they will be given asylum and that they will find their way into this complete leviathan complicated system that we have that tends to tie itself up in knots over years during all of the time that these cases are going on, they are put up at taxpayer expense. They know that all of this is going to happen. Obviously that will incentivise more, and at the same time it poisons public opinion against the whole thing of asylum, and it often means also that the people who are most in need, who tend to be poorer, less able to pay the people traffickers, and often
but they're all going to end up in some kind of horrible situation in this country. If they're women, they're probably going to end up in prostitution. If they're men, they'll probably end up in some slave trade or other.
But they may not make it over across at all, because they're predominantly those who do cross the channel tend to be young, healthy males. And often they are comparatively wealthier than the people who are not able to get that far. So all of this, often it means that the attention is diverted and it goes away from helping people through the proper channels, the people who are the most in need of asylum.
Yeah, well, people just don't like the way it looks. And it doesn't look like a lot of helpless people. It looks like a lot of people jumping on a sort of bandwagon and going, oh, well, who's next? I mean, it feels like there's some kind of conveyor belt going on where there's another dinghy leaving, or you can get on the next one, or, you know, there's a crowd of people here.
And then when they get there is a kind of there is a sort of legal conveyor belt of sorts. There is an industry of human rights lawyers who make a lot of money out of pursuing these claims and trying to convince the government that these are
also paid for by the public purse.
Well, exactly.
I actually did bother to go to some of the refugee camps on the Syrian and Iraqi borders, right? And I was speaking to a lot of people there, and some in Turkey as well. And they were saying, look, actually, we would like the mess in our own country to be sorted out so that we can return home. And that is really a policy that I think we should be helping to fund, or certainly through our very generous foreign aid.
And that's what we do. That's what we have been doing. We're the second biggest donor in that region.
Yeah.
And we understood, even though we're accused of heartlessness for it, that it is better if people can stay closer to the countries that they come from originally, so that when things finally pass, they will be able to go back and rebuild it. It's not in anyone's interests for there to be a complete exodus of the youngest, fittest, and most able to contribute.
Exactly.
Exactly right. Let's take your first nomination, please.
I think so. I think it's been a bad week for the government in all sorts of ways, and there are lots of potential planks, but by far the most obvious, the most planky of the government planks this week, it's got to be Gav, hasn't it? It's got to be Gav.
Good old Gavin. Yeah.
Well,
and if I hear one more time people say, well, of course, he's unsackable because he knows everybody's secrets because he used to work at the Whip's office. I mean, surely that's a load of old cobblers, isn't it?
Well, I mean, he was even today, after everything, after making this bad decision, the fact that they had... Did you know they cancelled the exams back in April? So they made that decision. I think, to me, that was at the height of the kind of headless...
Which was the first mistake, really, wasn't it?
The first mistake, and everything stemmed from that. It's quite clear that none of the alternatives to actual testing, actual learning in person are any good.
No.
Online classes, no good. The algorithm, no good. Teachers' predictions, no good, though I think an improvement.
Yeah.
But, you know, they've been paying catch-up ever since from that cowardly, lazy decision. Yeah. And it's not just them, it's
because
the
I've
teaching
often
unions.
said as well, I mean, one of the easiest things to social distance is an exam hall.
Exactly.
You know, you're all sitting about 2
Exactly.
feet
It's always been social distance.
or 2 metres apart anyway, aren't you?
But it was just, I think that decision came, I don't know, it's hard to remember. I've been keeping a diary of the pandemic, so I could kind of remember what we were talking about, what the public mood was like.
Oh, that's bleak.
It's pretty bleak, yeah. There's some funny bits. But there were different phases. One of the phases was the full headless chicken phase at the beginning, when everyone was going mad. Everyone was watching the Exotic Joe documentary, which kind of reflected our sense of general lunacy.
Right.
And I think that there were lots of, that was the time when there were mini culture wars about whether you were allowed to sunbathe in the park, that kind of thing.
And what day you should do it on.
And I think at that time, if some official, some Mandarin comes and says, let's just cancel the exams, it'll be easier to do that, you can totally imagine in that climate people just saying, yeah, obviously it's the right thing to do.
Yes.
And now we are paying for that decision.
These were the days I seem to remember when I signed up to all kinds of weird wine delivery companies because you couldn't get any wine. I couldn't get into any of the supermarkets, right, because there were too many big queues. You couldn't get any home deliveries.
Yeah.
So I signed up with Naked Wines. I signed up with some place in Bermondsey that charges about 30 quid a bottle and only delivers by, 10
Worth it in the
at a time.
I think.
But yeah, now I've got all these subscriptions to things I'm desperately trying to get out of, because I just go to Waitrose now.
And then when everyone else is out clapping for the NHS keywords on a Thursday, you're like, majestic wine, majestic wine.
No, my two hands couldn't reach each other by 7 o'clock at night. I just kept missing myself. I've been drinking since about 7 a.m.
But what really got
I've got a radio show today. I don't know. What day is it?
This was at the weekends, I wanted to know. Anyway, sorry.
To go back to Gav, the thing that really got me after all of these catastrophic decisions, the fact that they could have announced the change to predicted grades a week ago, they would have spared kids this absolute hellish week that they've had. Not to mention the logistical nightmare for universities who are now dealing with the people who've now been bumped up, who want to retake their old places, but they've since been allocated. Was the fact that Gavin Williamson is still doing his stupid "I'm the chief whip" macho posturing. So he had a photo shoot where
there's something funny going on with his look as well, isn't there?
Yeah, he's sort of drinking a mug, sort of staring intently into the camera, looking a bit like a child pretending to be a Bond villain.
I think he's had highlights done as well. There's something different about his hair.
And he also has a whip on his desk, even though he's not the chief whip anymore. It's pathetic.
Gosh, that's horrendous.
I mean, there's nothing worse than politicians who think they've got sort of style and elan, and they think I'm actually really quite smart and clever. Yeah.
But ultimately, they are just the guy with the pet tarantula.
Yes.
There's nothing more to it.
Yes. Well, somebody once described the Houses of Parliament to me as like being in school except without any bullies, because all the sort of dweebs wander about and nobody tells them they're idiots, and they all think they're in charge.
used to work in Parliament. I can confirm there are plenty of bullies as well. They're just quite dweeby bullies.
Yes.
Yeah. But I like Gavin Williamson's mum used to work at a job centre in Swindon, so imagine he'll be giving her a call quite soon. You know what I mean? Mum, you got anything going?
It's quite a contrast, that, isn't it? Head of State of the Ministry of Education and a job centre in Swindon.
He was also previously the MD of a fireplace firm, which is ironic because his career now is up in flames.
But of course, people say, well, what we want is people who've done other jobs. So you can't have it both ways.
It's nothing to do with Gavin Williamson's background or his previous job or anything like that. It's just to do with the fact that we don't have serious politicians. We have these posturing man-children who are desperate, even after they've caused untold heartache. They're still trying to look moody and interesting at the camera while they're doing their photo shoot.
Also, the sloganising of everything as well, which is really starting to get to me. I saw Nicola Sturgeon doing one of her briefings because she loves them so much she can't stop doing them, even though there's nothing to say. You know, nobody's died. No, but it's nice up in Aberdeen. There's a few people are not very well, and you go, well, what's the point of this really? But they've now shortened the slogan to save lives. That's it. It doesn't say stay home and save lives. It doesn't say be alert and stay alive. It just says save lives. Well, like, what's the alternative? What do you want people to go around killing everyone? You know,
wow.
What does it mean?
Well, I'm glad that someone cleared that up because, you know, I brought my pickaxe with me. And
otherwise it's going to go with a machete onto the underground and just start killing people. You know, oh no, Nicola Sturgeon said we should save the lives. Okay, all right, fine. Thank you for pointing that out.
Thank God, Nicola.
Yeah, just in time.
You arrived just in time.
Now, just to make matters even more ridiculous, right? Elizabeth Denham is my first nominee, who's the Information Commissioner. Now, everybody knows Tony Blair set up the Ministry of Information so that we couldn't get any information at all. If anybody's ever tried to get any information out of any government of any kind, in Scotland, in Scottish Parliament, I worked up there, they actively discouraged everyone from ever answering a freedom of information request. And it would just go round and round and round and round for so many years that eventually the journalist would die and they'd never find anything out. But so anyway, she decides in the midst of the pandemic that she wants to work from home, which is fair enough. You know, lots of civil servants work from home. The only difference for her is that her home is on the west coast of Canada, and she's decided that it's a really great idea for her to be 8 hours behind Britain, so she can never talk to anybody in the office when she's actually awake, right? As a result of which, the two biggest cock-ups of the data system in this country, one, the A-levels, and two, the track and trace system, she's supposed to be in charge of overseeing all that. Is any surprise that it's all gone horribly wrong?
Genius.
Incredible, isn't it?
Oh my goodness, as excuses go, that one is tip-top.
Yeah,
it's better than anything I managed when I was a student.
You'd always have the phone. I mean, it'd always be answering machine, wouldn't it? If you're calling her from Whitehall at, say, 9 a.m. when you get in, if you do get in, because only 1 in 7 of them's in, apparently. And that's 1 o'clock in the morning in the west coast of Canada. So you've no chance of getting hold of her. You're leaving at 5. You give her a quick call. It's only 9 o'clock in the morning, so she's probably still having her breakfast. You know, it's unbelievable. How is this possible?
So you couldn't have just having your eardrums removed, so you can't hear all the complaints that are coming your way, isn't it? Oh, I think I'll just nip to the other side of the world. Yeah. No one will bother with that.
She's paid, by the way, 180 grand a year for this job.
Wow.
You know,
of course she is.
But I mean, who is she responsible to? Because it's the kind of thing that if I went to my boss and said, "Hi, Chris, I think I'd quite like to. I'd just like to go and live in Aruba, and you won't be able to contact me all of the time. I'll be contactable between 4 p.m. and 5 p.m. And apart from that, I probably won't get very good internet, so you won't be able to get hold of me.
You know, what's the problem?
Yeah, but I mean, you see, we have lots of meetings and things. I mean, Chris would just say, "You are taking the piss." Don't be ridiculous. But somehow these quangocrats, people who have incredible power, and right now at a time of great crisis, they can behave in a way that would get most of us sacked out on our ear before.
Well, I would have thought the first piece of information that the Information Commissioner should have given us was she was moving to Canada. And you say, well, thanks very much. We'll appoint somebody else in the meantime.
Exactly.
And when you decide you want to come back, I mean, you could even have had an interim Information Commissioner while she was away, and she could come back later. Apparently, she's due back on the 7th of September.
Oh, that's good of her.
So that's good of her. Unless, of course, she has to then quarantine herself. I don't know if Canada's on the quarantine list. It probably is. Everywhere else seems to be.
But I do, on a serious note, I do kind of worry that people get used to these working habits. And then after the crisis, it will come to be, you know, the ability to go and set up shop in Canada at a moment's notice. That will be seen as a kind of human right. It will be quite difficult for employers to say,
all these people going,
ridiculous.
I really like working from home. I get to spend more time with the family, and it's really lovely, and in work-life balance, and I don't have to get on a horrible train and go and see horrible people in office. Well, that's fine. Why don't you just retire then? You know, that's what you do when you retire. And anyone who wants to spend more time with their family, I think there's something mentally wrong with them. You know, I mean, when I had a young family, the first thing I wanted to do was get out the door and go to work. You know, they gave me 2 weeks paternity leave once when one of my kids was born. I was back in a week.
All at once.
I was back in a week. I was like, a week's enough. That's fine. I don't need 2. Thank you very much indeed. You know.
What did Mrs. Graham have to say about this?
She's divorced me since then. So. But that wasn't because of that. But I'm not going to get into that here. There isn't enough time. Who's your second one?
Right, so I'm going for the former CEO of McDonald's, Stephen Easterbrook.
Oh, yes.
He was caught telling a Big Mac and lies,
The
wasn't
Lothario.
he? Yes,
Very good. I like
absolutely. So 52 from Watford, started as a burger flipper, worked his way up right to the top
That's
of that particular...
quite an extraordinary story, actually.
It is.
That he got to get from doing that to being the boss of the whole company.
Which is amazing, but he fell foul of a rule that, I'm just quoting this now, McDonald's rule is... Quote, we've got a zero tolerance policy on secret sexual relationships. Well, so did my ex.
Most people have, actually, yeah. Most people have.
Yeah.
The problem with secret sexual relationships is that they never stay secret.
Well, it kind of makes it sound like as soon as it's out in the open, and as soon as they get caught, then McDonald's is like, great, good for you.
Yeah, well done.
They get caught in the broom cupboard.
But this is it. But this is the big question. This is why I think he's a plank, right? Is because basically since he's managed to negotiate a £42 million severance package, nice, well done, mate. Yeah, so I'll take that, rip your hand off. They've since come out and accused him of having sexual relations with 3 other employees. Now, he has not
Does
denied...
that mean he gets more money now or less?
Well, this is it. He has not denied this, but what he has said is that McDonald's were in possession of the facts originally when they negotiated his original severance package. But... Now, if I knew that McDonald's had a zero tolerance policy on secret sexual relationships, and I knew that my severance package was going to be in the region of £42 million, I like women. I think I like £42 million more. I think I would have been inclined to keep it in my trousers.
Yes. Well, that's obviously a problem for him, though. Otherwise, he would have done that in the first place. But I mean, presumably he gets to keep the money, though. He doesn't have to give it back.
Well, this is going to be the result of a case that's about to start now in America, where he's basically saying, look, actually,
if they've already paid him, I think they're going to struggle to get it back.
I would imagine so.
Because having been the recipient of 1 or 2. Having been the recipient of 1 or 2 severance packages, nowhere near that kind of figure. Once you get the money, you've already moved it, so before they can take it back, just in case.
Well, there he is, plank.
Life advice in
Well, what the funny thing is how much of this actually does go on. Yeah. How many of these characters in all walks of life, whether it's politicians, whether it's teachers, whether it's police officers, whether it's businessmen. There's all sorts of sexual shenanigans going on all the time.
Yeah.
I'm just amazed that more people don't get found out.
I am as well, but I mean, I suppose he did also allegedly take one of them on the company's private jet, which just tends to be a bit of a giveaway.
That's asking for trouble, isn't it?
That is really pushing out the boat, isn't it? I mean, you're going to get found out that way.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. What's your second one?
My second one, I'm going to have to, I can't do it justice. I've chosen Lewis Hamilton for my second one.
Well, he's been in this list plenty of times before.
Really?
Yes.
Well, I feel a bit bad because I'm a huge fan of Formula One and I'm a big fan of Lewis Hamilton normally, but recently he's fallen rather into that tactic that I'm seeing a lot of sports people getting into now, which is they can't just be good at kicking a football around or wielding a cricket bat or whatever. They have to also be very deep and meaningful and profound.
Yes.
They have to be a kind of Dalai Lama figure. And recently he put out a tweet that was a particularly stunning example of this tendency. So it's him on a boat, I think sailing around Monaco where he lives, and just giving his sage wisdom. So he says, took the day off on Tuesday, a day for myself, and no phone, no training, just me and Roscoe, who's his dog, out on the water. I had time to reflect on where we are in the world today. Every day, I see something upsetting happening. People being abused, people suffering, volcanoes erupting, explosions, oceans and forests.
Volcanoes erupting? Sorry, I must have missed that. I haven't seen a volcano erupting for a while.
Yeah, he just lives at Mount Etna, just like, oh, it's happening. Forests being destroyed. 2020 is such a heavy year, but it gives me hope seeing people come together fighting for justice, cleaning up oceans, and generally doing more for our planet.
Cleaning up oceans while he's literally expelling petroleum into one.
Gas-guzzling boat.
Yeah.
And I'm sending you all positive waves.
Oh, that's nice.
Presumably, he did have his phone with him, otherwise he couldn't have recorded that.
Well, that's the thing. And in fact, when I looked at the footage, it looks very much like it was just him and a quiet film crew on board this boat. And it's,
did you see the great picture of him walking along this week where somebody was holding an umbrella over his head? I mean, that's where he is now. You know, he's so big that he can't carry his own umbrella.
Even Michael Jackson held his own umbrella.
But I think that is another part of this puzzle, which is that celebrities, it's almost as if the more famous they are, the more detached they become, and the more insufferable. So there was that video, and they've been particularly insufferable during the pandemic. You know, we've had Madonna and her video from the bath. We've had that horrific, unspeakable, I'm sorry to any viewers, trigger warning alert, the video of all those actors singing Imagine, which is a song I hate at the best of times, but a bunch of celebrities,
That's right.
a bunch of celebrities singing it out of tune and thinking somehow that this is the kind of thing that's going to lift morale during the global pandemic and a massive economic collapse that's heading our way.
Well, you have to go back to all those guys who were also, you know, in their locked up away in their mansions, talking about how awful the lockdown was. You know, who was that? Who was that? Sam Smith. That's right, weeping into the camera
from his £12
million mansion in Hampstead.
Their £12 million mansion.
You just misgendered.
I did, unfortunately, but no, it's enough to make me just want to walk into the sea. You know what I mean? This stuff, isn't it?
Be careful you don't get run over by Lewis Hamilton in a very fast speedboat.
Just him and Roscoe and the
while
film
he's
crew.
filming. Oh shit! You know.
I mean, it's obviously a bit depressing that like they're not really making a lot of new content. The comedy circuit's not really up and running. But I don't think we need comics right now because we have celebrities to do the job.
Well, really, I mean, the irony of all of what you've just described, it clearly bypasses him, doesn't it? I mean, I love the fact as well that he's now worth probably about a couple $100 million.
Easy.
Lives in Monaco, doesn't pay any tax because it's a tax haven. He now wears a chain around his neck with a lock on it to signify slavery, right? And it's made of gold, funnily enough, solid gold, obviously. And you just think, what do you think you're doing? What do you think you're doing? And then he tells everybody that they should do more to save the planet. This is a guy who drives around in possibly one of the fastest burning petrol machines that man has ever made.
Although
he flies
I will say
everywhere.
that they went hybrid car a few years ago, so Formula One is slightly cleaning up the act.
Well,
but
it's about time, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, but they still use an awful lot of petrol.
They do.
I mean, I think compared to the amount I put in my Range Rover, I reckon it would probably last about 2 nanoseconds.
Yeah, and just the fact that it's a sport, there aren't many sports where every 2 weeks they have to uproot thousands and thousands of people to fly to
everybody to
different
another part
far-flung
of the world.
locations of the world.
it's nuts.
Yeah.
It really is. It's unbelievable.
I know, and I'm not one of these people who I don't mind it when someone as amazing as Lewis Hamilton, one of the great sportsmen of our time, makes loads of money. He's worth every penny. I just resent the hypocrisy of it.
I don't care how much money they make. I'm a free marketeer on that one. I mean, make as much money as you like, but don't tell me what to do. And don't tell me not to eat a hamburger just because, you know, you're feeling a bit guilty about, you know, your emissions. You know, I don't think so. Right, my one, I'm going to go back to last week because this happened literally just after the Plank of the Week last week was finished in production and got sent out. Ben & Jerry's, right? The ice cream company, who seem to have forgotten that they make ice cream. And they also seem to have forgotten that they're not actually a tiny little mum and pop store which started in Vermont. What they actually are is a brand within the overarching global evil empire called Unilever, right? Who actually sell skin whitening cream in India. Right,
really?
And manufacture it and sell it and urge everybody to get fair. Because obviously if your skin is too brown, that's a bad thing, according to Unilever, right? Ben & Jerry's decided to take it upon themselves that there's no such thing as borders, that there's no such thing as illegal migration, and that basically everybody can go and live wherever they want.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go and find Unilever's sort of chairman's house and just go and live in it. Because I think presumably that would be all right, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Oh my God.
It's like the George Clooney approach, and he met Angela. This is going back a few years. He met Angela Merkel, did a big thing with her about how borders shouldn't exist, and then built a wall around his villa in Lake Como so that no people could get in.
Yeah, and put a few armed guards on it, no doubt as well. The greatest thing as well about this was that it turns out that Ben & Jerry's not only is owned by Unilever, but also had lost a very valuable court case against some Mexican migrant workers who they'd imported into Vermont to milk the cows at slave labour charges, right? So they actually had their own slaves from Mexico working in the dairy farms of Vermont because they basically bought up the whole of Vermont, and every cow in Vermont is owned by Ben & Jerry's. And then also, worse than that, there was an incident with some kind of poison in the ice cream. Once they became, this massive conglomerate, rather than doing the old mum and pop stuff, I think it was weed killer or something found in it, So, I mean, there are those who would say all publicity is good publicity. I don't think for Ben & Jerry's this was a particularly good episode. Definitely plankery.
Definite plankery. And I remember Unilever. When I was at school, we were obsessed with Unilever because of something to do with orangutans and palm oil. I think that was what they used in their products, and they were the big baddies. And as you say, it's such a shameless little volte-face that they're trying to pretend that they are this couple of washed-up hippies from the 60s. Yeah, man, we just make our ice cream.
Yeah,
man.
that's all we do, man. Yeah. We get stoned and we make ice cream.
It's totally shame. And I think it's actually not. It's a shame that we live in such a kind of politicised culture war world in which F1 drivers have to be saints, and Gary Lineker is advising the government on refugees, and Jamie Oliver and all this stuff. And we can't even have an ice cream without it getting political.
I know.
But this is why it'll all come crumbling down, because they hold everyone else and therefore themselves to a standard that is impossible to maintain. Right? You cannot, especially if we're doing what we're doing now, which is trawling back through 13-year-old tweets just to find some time that someone might have said something that now by today's standards are remotely offensive. It comes crashing down. It's built on sand, all this stuff. You just can't do it. You know what I mean? And what's gone wrong with the idea, the idea that like Roy Keane, fabulous footballer, he was a midfielder, he was an absolute animal. That's Roy Keane. Yeah. Don't ask him to run for president of Ireland or something like that. And just take them for what they are.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right. It's also, it always ends in tears. I mean, there's an advert at the moment. I think it's a Coca-Cola advert on TV, which I saw the other night, which is so ridiculously woke. And you forget that these are huge, massive conglomerate companies that are exploiting people all over the world. But yet they're putting out this really nice message about let's make a change or something crap like that. And it's all about how we're all going to become nicer and we're all going to be helping each other and everybody's the same, and it's all just rubbish.
They're only allowed to do this because we live in a fundamentally quite facile and superficial world in which people don't tend to do the digging. It's amazing how often these claims fall apart within a few days. But it's amazing how initially people jump on the bandwagon and don't bother to ask any questions.
Oh, well, they all want to be saying, well, it's a great
nice
example of that with
action.
Ben & Jerry's. Our good friend Femi suddenly popped up on Twitter holding a jar of Ben & Jerry's, obviously unaware of the fact that they had slaves in Vermont and the fact that they sold skin whitening cream with their parent company. And he's actually said these words, "I stand by Ben & Jerry's."
So he brought the ice cream on screen with him?
Yeah.
Wow.
Had a picture holding it.
That's,
And you go, they sell skin whitening cream.
I sort of don't blame individuals per se. I think it's not Femi's fault. I mean, lots of people don't bother to do the digging. Lots of people prefer to jump on the bandwagon.
But his first instinct is to go, oh, look, they said something nice about migrants, therefore I must support them.
Yeah, that's true.
Without checking. Without checking it out, without even thinking. You just go, oh, I want to be on the side of those guys because everybody else who's criticising them is a right-wing fascist.
Yeah.
I'd be very interested to know if they actually did profit off the back of this, because they were being talked about a lot, and that is valuable if you're saying the name a lot.
There are some people who say that they got their name out there. But I would have thought they've pretty much reached saturation, haven't they?
I'm sure that's true. I mean, I think there's quite a lot of. No one ever talks about it, I'd just love to pay for a company. I would give money to any company that when asked to comment on Black Lives Matter or the refugee crisis or I don't know what Network Rail or whatever it is. They said no, we make belts. That's what we do.
That's it.
That's what we do. I don't have
provide a train service.
That would be refreshing.
Exactly.
That would be very refreshing. Your final nominee, Patrick.
Right, we're going all the way to Belarus, guys, so strap yourselves in.
Good. Maybe you could explain what's happening to me, because I'm very confused.
Oh, well, so am I. But no, the leader of Belarus, Alexander Lucky Lukashenko.
Yes.
Well, he's Lukashenko's run out, unfortunately. He's gone too far. He's fallen into the trap that most dictators fall into, which is just to become too dictatory.
Yes.
Listen,
it happened to Tony Blair. It happened to anyone.
But unlike him, he might end up in The Hague. But
I knew it was going wrong with Tony Blair. He started saying things like, well, sometimes you have to make unpopular decisions. That's when you know you've been in too long.
It was the voices in my head that told me.
So he claimed, this is where he went wrong.
Yeah.
He claimed that he'd secured 80% of the votes in the latest general election. So cue everyone going down to the local bodega. Vlad, did you vote for Lukashenko? No. Sergei, did you vote for? No. And then videos emerged of police officers removing ballot boxes, winching ballot boxes out of voting rooms and just basically just destroying them. Videos have come out of that. Now the state police state TV, I should say, have stopped doing state TV. So there's just an empty sofa there, which I kind of wish happened to this morning. But anyway, maybe one day. And also, as well, on top of that, he decided that he wanted to, I'm going to do a rally now with all the workers of Belarus. These guys love me. So he came and stood on a podium, stood on the plinth, and all the workers turned their back on him and walked off.
Right.
So he had to walk off. Yeah. So he's, but no, this is the best thing. This is why I think he's such a plank. Is that so the people of Belarus are actually more pro-Russia than pro-EU as a rule, right? But this guy has now become too toxic for Putin.
Right.
So Putin can't now come out and say, I support this guy, because
Right.
he's so unpopular that it would turn the people of Belarus against Russia.
Yeah.
So he's basically got to shepherd him out of power and put someone similar to Alexander Lukashenko in place. When you're
Then they just have to send the old Novichok boys down.
we can imagine.
You know.
Yeah, unfortunately,
Well,
Alexander.
do you remember that guy? This was a long time ago in Ukraine. There was a guy who was the kind of, I think, either leader of the opposition or was running against the incumbent in some way, shape, or form. And they poisoned him with mercury, right? And he could actually physically see his face was turning darker and darker, and eventually, he died, I think, in the end. But just before he died, his face was literally sort of grey because he'd been poisoned by something had been dropped into his tea. And I mean, we joke about it, but that's what they do.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah,
I mean, it's
100%.
quite terrifying.
Totally what they do. But yeah, it is that dictatory thing of sort of like Greek tragedy of reach extending the grasp always.
Yeah,
It reminds me slightly, there's an episode of, sorry to trivialise something so awful, but it reminds me slightly of an episode of The Simpsons where Bart fakes he's got Fs and he tries to bump them up a grade and he decides to try and make them all look like
Should've just
A's.
talked to Gavin Williamson.
But he went for A's, right?
Right.
He would have probably got away with it if he'd gone for a D or a B or something, but he had to go for all A's, and that's what Lukashenko did with his election. He didn't just go for a clean 60-40. He had to be 80% victory with his nearest opponent getting less than 10.
Exactly.
And they've also had this great thing which they do in these countries where they organise a demonstration on his behalf.
Yeah.
Supporters, right? Of which unfortunately there was only about 200.
Yeah.
And then thousands of other people joined in who were against him.
Yeah.
And that was, that
But
was
they
the end
love
of
me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also
I was saying boo words.
there was a guy being dragged away at some point and he was shouting, this was obviously in subtitles, shouting that actually he'd voted for the president. But nevertheless they were still arresting him and dragging him off. And he was like, I was the one guy that voted for him.
Well, they have to get him stuffed and put on the mantelpiece.
Yeah. I mean, it does. I mean, it's always slightly worrying, though, isn't it, when you see this kind of thing happening? Because you just know that it's not going to end well.
No.
There will be there'll be tanks on the street at some point,
Yeah.
and it'll all
Yeah.
go horribly
And
wrong,
also
like
that
it did
there
in
are-
Ukraine, which was awful for a long
And
time.
also we know that the EU is not going to step in and help Belarus. They've got lots of their own problems. And I think there are probably many in the EU privately hoping that weak and Lukashenko can kind of cling on and keep things roughly as they are, because this is one fallout that they couldn't possibly manage right now.
Yeah.
But there has been a failure of international solidarity.
Well, the EU has been completely useless in all sorts of ways
There
for
is
the
this
last few
snobbery
years.
about Eastern Europe, because it's an area of the world that lots of Western Europeans don't really think of as equal.
Yeah.
They don't think that these people value freedom and democracy, and actually that's not the case. Often very highly educated, have exactly the same values and
Right.
desires as Western
Right.
Europeans.
But also the EU doesn't like some of those countries because they fear that they will elect some kind of right-wing government, like they've done in Hungary, like they've done in Poland, and then they start making these weird noises about how, well, we might have to withdraw our funding, if they don't do the right thing, and it's like,
Yeah.
sorry?
Yeah.
What, you're not going to give them
Yeah.
money because you don't like their politics?
Yeah.
Really?
Unless it's
Yeah.
the kind of Belarusian Justin Trudeau, then they're not interested.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, if Belarus did produce a Justin Trudeau figure, I mean, he'd go down like a fart and left at the ballot box, wouldn't he? Seriously, there's no way that anyone would ever vote for that person over there.
No.
It's just not going to happen.
It's not going to happen at all, no. But we should watch it with interest. But it's a very good one, I think. So, third and final nominee, Madeline?
Who did I pick for my third? Sorry, I made a note of it. Oh yes, okay. I've gone for Dr. Priyamvada Gopal.
Oh, yes.
I don't know if you recall, but she is a Cambridge professor
Yes.
of some form of grievance studies, I think.
Grievance studies?
She's been
I mean, really?
She's been. I mean, I think Twitter has really revealed a lot about, celebrities, politicians. There are loads of politicians who should be nowhere near a Twitter account, but also academics. You realise just how feeble the thinking, how the lack of intellectual rigour, just how easy and basic these people with massive PhDs and triple star firsts actually are.
It's like all the barristers, the weirdo
Oh
barristers
my God!
as well,
Yes,
isn't it?
yes. The QCs. There was
They
one
think
QC
they're
who
all clever.
There was one. There's Jessica Seymour QC.
She's
was
bonkers.
actually she's the proper. I mean, it's between her and Jolyon, isn't it? But
Yeah.
she was she actually suggested that there might be something to these mad rumours that Boris's baby was fake. You're like, wow.
Gosh.
She started
Great.
following me, some weeks ago
She
for no
follows me
good
on-
reason.
She follows me too. I hate
So
people.
I had a bit of fun with her for a while and batted her around for a bit, and then I just blocked her because I thought there's only one reason why she's here. She's here to try and catch me out doing something,
Yeah.
and then she's going to try and threaten me with something. She then claimed that I'd cancelled her.
Oh, cancelled, yeah.
Like, no, I've just blocked you on Twitter. I haven't cancelled you. I haven't made you lose your job. You
Yeah.
can carry on being as useless as possible.
I mean, that
getting
is-
all your money from the EU.
What is free speech if not the ability to land on Mike Graham's Twitter timeline? I mean, what does any of it
Exactly.
mean?
Exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
it is incredible. But you're absolutely right. because they suffer from the same kind of narcissism. These barristers who think they're very highly educated, they think they can think better than anybody else.
Yes.
I mean, you know,
Yes,
Jolyon Moron.
classic intellectual
Jolyon Moron
idiot.
is a tax lawyer, right? And he's obviously not a very good one because he has to supplement his income by doing all this other crap, you know, suing the government every 5 minutes.
I think he's done very well for himself, actually.
Well, no, he makes a fortune.
But it's like Noam Chomsky. He's a linguist. He's not an, you know, he maybe should stick to being a great linguist. It's like they always have to broaden their remit to stuff that they don't understand.
But these academics, and she's a very good example, they don't appear to have any actual common sense of any kind. They have no kind of what my father would call grey matter, which actually enables them to see what's going on. They think something happening around the world is of some consequence to them. They imagine that other things are happening, and they appear to have no kind of grip on reality.
The reason I mentioned her this week is that
what's she done this
she got
week?
into trouble recently for saying that some of her old tweets resurfaced, including one where she says that she's constantly resisting the urge to kneecap white men, and that white lives don't matter as white lives, whatever that means. And she's got into a big Twitter spat with Douglas Murray, who wrote an article. I think it was his article for us in the Telegraph last weekend, which mentions the Good Doctor, and she then characteristically accused him of being a racist. But anyone who's read or followed Douglas Murray will know that you do not engage him in a Twitter spat because he will win. It's the verbal equivalent of a very erudite drive-by shooting. And that's exactly what happened, and it's beautiful. And the reason I mention it is partly
Surely
because...
she'll end up suing him or something, failing, right, miserably.
Probably, almost certainly. But the other thing I think it's so indicative of is the fact that not just the lack of common sense and so on, but the complete double standards with what you're allowed to say if you're a left-wing academic, and absolutely no consequences, no repercussions.
She's at Cambridge, I think, isn't she? So if you had said the entirely same thing about black men, can you imagine what would happen? I mean, you'd be out the door.
And David Starkey said something that I thought was genuinely racist and awful on a podcast recently, but it was not as bad as what Dr. Priyamvada Gopal said. And he's cancelled left, right and centre, and she's since been promoted in her role at Cambridge. You see the same thing with, for example, what my mate Lawrence Fox, what he said, compared to what Miriam Margolyes...
You mean your secret boyfriend?
No.
Surely. I mean, according to the Mail Online, you know...
Never trust the Mail Online.
No, I know. I saw that. I thought it was hilarious because I've got to know him very slightly since this whole business has been going on. You know, and we've had him on Talk Radio quite a lot. And he's such a great guy, and I really like him a lot. And when I saw that, I just burst out laughing because I thought, I mean, I don't really know you terribly well, but I'm pretty sure that you're not going out with Lawrence Fox.
No, we're just mates.
And it was written in such a way, like nobody ever goes out with anybody who they're not going out with.
Well,
really?
it just made me laugh. So I thought the best approach was to try and troll them. So I put various pictures up of me and people that I've stood next to, since that's the metric to be having a quote passionate love affair.
But do you know what people say? And you will now probably be the victim of this. Is that never goes? That will be on the internet forever. So whenever anybody Googles you, they'll find your relationship with Lawrence Fox.
I look forward to the headlines.
Passionate love affair. You get the terminology right.
I look forward to the headlines when you and I go out for lunch later, mate.
Well, listen, there's usually a bit of Twitter action after I've had lunch. Has to be said, but we shall see. I'll try and remain orderly fashion this time. But I would blame Emily Carver for that, by the way.
If you remember what Lawrence said compared to what Miriam Margolyes said, saying that she was struggling not to wish Boris Johnson's death.
Well, do you know what? He came, we did a show from the pub on July the 4th when pubs reopened. We did a show from a pub not far from here, and we invited Lawrence down, he came down. And just before, the night before, I thought, I'll just watch that Newsnight clip, just to get, re-familiarise myself with it. And I'm looking at it and I thought, this must be the wrong clip.
Do you mean, the Question Time one?
Sorry, Question Time,
Yeah, Question Time.
And I thought, this must be the wrong clip. He's not actually said anything that's in any way controversial. He's just made a statement of fact, effectively. And I'm going, how did this actually happen? It's bizarre, isn't it?
I know. And it's all because another grievance studies academic puts up her hand and says, you're a racist.
Yeah.
I mean, they just use it in terms of the currency of offence. They overuse that word so much that the currency has been completely devalued. We're in like a state of terrible offence hyperinflation in which nothing means anything anymore.
No, exactly. And so if you are going to go and make some horrible, ghastly, nasty statement, you might as well make it as bad as you can, because if you make one which is marginal, it'll still be the same punishment.
More life advice here.
Yes, there you go. Listen, this is all coming to you for free, absolutely. Now, my final one is Marks and Spencer's. Not because of the fact that they're about to lay off 7,000 people, which isn't in and of itself pretty horrendous, because they've finally worked out actually nobody's going into any of their shops. This is largely because nobody wants to buy anything that Marks and Spencer sells because it's old-fashioned, it's too expensive, And also, they don't have much of it. I had a text from somebody today who said, I went into a Marks & Spencer shop in Bury, up in Lancashire, and wanted to buy a suit. And they said, we don't have them here. You'll have to go to the big shop in Manchester. And it's like, you're a shop. It's like this thing now where you go into a shop and they go, we haven't got any of that in stock, but you can order it. And I'm like, if I wanted to order it, I would have ordered it to be delivered to my house. I'm out shopping, so I want to buy it. I don't want to click and collect it tomorrow, because I'm here today, and this is the problem with all these shops. They haven't thought through what it is that they do. But the reason I'm actually putting them in the planks list is for something that happened a little bit earlier in the week, where a woman went in to buy some bras in Marks & Spencer's and apparently discovered that the white bras were somehow labelled differently to the darker coloured bras. She happened to be from an ethnic minority, and she complained to the Marks & Spencer's staff that this particular bra she wanted was described as tobacco. Right. Now, as far as I know, tobacco isn't racist. I don't think it is.
It's a colour. It's on the Dulux colour charts.
Is it? Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you know that better than I do. I didn't know. Didn't know you were such an expert in the Dulux colour charts.
Raised by a textile merchant.
Tobacco has negative connotations. So that's racist.
I assumed it was the colour rather than the actual tobacco plantation
thing. They
thing.
say that the name that it's tobacco is a bad thing, but
really?
Some of us love tobacco. So.
Well, I've got some Molten Brown tobacco shampoo, which actually does smell like tobacco, which is great if you've given up smoking, because you can still smell like you smoke, no matter whether you actually smoke or not.
Mike, you and your racist shampoo, my God.
But can you believe? But the worst thing about all of this is that Marks & Spencer's then agreed that it was a racist term, and so they've now pulled this particular bra and going to give it a new name. I
actually was, out of interest, took a look at one of my own Marks & Spencer's bras to see what that was called, and the colour was called alabaster, which.
That sounds a bit racist, doesn't it? Alabaster?
It's like a stone. It's like a stone. It's
a way, but
grey.
would you not describe that as they used to describe some skin as alabaster, like very soft?
I don't know if I'd say it was racist, but in terms of the connotations, what I associate with that would be like hard grey stone.
Yes.
That's not necessarily what a woman wants to be.
No.
In the same way that people might not love to be tobacco.
This would be
maybe it's just a bad name and it's not a big racist conspiracy.
Well, maybe this is why Marks & Spencer's having to let go 7,000 people, because they've got idiots in the marketing department giving stupid names to all of their stuff. Yeah. And when you buy something, you don't need to be sort of lulled into this weird world where you go, it's alabaster, or it's tobacco. Yeah. No, it's a bra, actually.
That is the fashion industry you've just described. I don't expect men to understand these things.
I don't really understand it very much.
Pigeonholers, all right.
Although I am wearing a Paul Smith tie.
There's a great scene in, that scene in The Devil Wears Prada where she's like, a blue skirt. And she's like, it's not just a blue skirt, it's cerulean. And then explains how that colour skirt was chosen for that girl who thinks that she's not interested in fashion.
But the male equivalent of that is cars, because you can't any longer just buy a black car. No. It has to be some particular kind of black, like matte black or cerulean
Henry Ford
black.
would have hated it.
Yeah, I know. But every colour now has a sort of supplementary word, so you can't. It's not just blue. It's aqua blue, or it's something else, like blue silver. Or
and that's why it's an extra 10 grand.
And that's why it's an extra 10 grand. And that's why men go, it's not just blue. Yeah. It's metallic blue. It's just ridiculous.
Wait, so we can't do the whole. My nephews love to do the yellow car thing. If they see one, they punch them in the arm and go yellow cars. So they have to be like marigold
I've
car.
never heard of that.
Have
you
they not?
Disturbed these children?
No, we used to do that. Maybe I don't know. Maybe it's a Warwickshire thing. We used to do that all the time at my school.
Really? No, I did it as well.
You see a yellow car and you punch someone.
Yeah, you just. It's a bit like pinch punch first of the month. It's
yeah.
like
See, I'd never heard of that.
Maybe it's a generational thing.
I'd never heard of that until about 15 years ago. I'd never heard. Well, I grew up in London, so we were just very cool because we were from London. So we didn't go around punching people or making up weird statements at the beginning of the month.
You just punched for your own reasons. You didn't need to excuse.
Well, you just punched back when somebody tried to mug you. That was the thing. But I was once told, and I don't know how true it is, that the police in London used to play a game similar to that, which was snooker for cars, where they would just basically stop cars. So they would stop a red car, which is, for 1 point. Yeah. And after that, you'd get a colour. And I believe that this could have happened in the 70s because they didn't have anything much else to do, apart from stopping the IRA.
Massively high crime rates.
Yeah. And they'd go, there's a yellow card, that's 2 points, then back to another red, and then green, and then a black was obviously for 8 points. I can see them doing that at night time. Because people also in the 70s, everyone drove around drunk. So you get a pretty good result if you pulled somebody over, generally speaking.
Kind of control group.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so now we've got the 9, right? So you know what we do. You guys have done this before. We have to whittle it down to 1 each. So I'm going to ask you, Madeline, to pick your favourite of Patrick's, of his 3.
So we've got Natasha Bouchard, the Calais mayor. We've
Yeah.
got the McDonald's former CEO. I'll make sure I get his name right. Alexander Lukashenko, known as Lucky to his mates.
It's got to be Lukashenko, hasn't it?
I think it has. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's good.
He is a plan.
It's that classic authoritarian thing where it's awful, people are going to die, and it's tragic. But there's also something unintentionally funny about the whole thing.
It's hilarious. Yeah.
It's like
is.
how dictators are often.
No,
like
it is. It's very
camp
much a
without
sort of.
meaning
It's
to
a
be.
very much a sort of Ealing comedy style of foreign policy, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know,
Sort of like
that's
the
one for the
producers or
teenagers.
something.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
you pick your favourite one of
Go on,
mine.
hit me
Mine,
again,
Elizabeth Denham, Information
Yes,
Commissioner.
yeah.
Marks
yeah.
and Spencer's
Yeah.
and Ben and Jerry's.
It's got to be Denham.
It has to be,
100%.
Oh,
You
I
know,
like
working
that.
from home.
That is a special case.
I know, the candidate, yeah, it's got to be.
It's got to be. Okay, so now I have to pick yours.
So mine were Gavin Williamson.
That's enough. Good enough for me.
But we do have his enlightened self, that Lewis Hamilton, the Dalai Lama, and
That's
his
true.
dog.
That's
I
true.
mean,
Although
Roscoe the
thing
dog.
is, Lewis Hamilton has been in it quite a bit, and he'll still
And
remain.
we've also
Don't worry.
got Dr. Priyam Vardagopal.
Yeah, but they'll still be in the top 10.
Yeah.
This is just for the final 3.
It's got to be Gavin this week.
I think
though.
it has to be this
Yeah,
week because
for
I mean,
that photo shoot alone.
I do imagine he'll be in the list again at some point. But I think so. Gavin Williamson, Elizabeth Denham,
Lucky
and
Lukashenko.
Lucky Lukashenko. That's a great final 3. I have to say.
It's
That
very,
really
isn't
is.
it?
I mean, now
I can
how
possibly
how
choose.
can we whittle it down from 3? Sometimes the easiest thing is to chuck one out who becomes 3rd. I don't know who that's going to be.
God,
though.
this is
tough.
hard.
This is really
This
tough.
is really tough. This is one of the
Sophie's
toughest ever.
choice. Oh, gosh.
Okay. Right. Well, Gavin Williamson might be in it again.
Right.
I don't know. I don't want to. This is probably the patriarchy in action here. I don't want to be responsible for binning yours off. actually.
Mansplaining.
Yeah,
Can't
yeah,
be doing
yeah.
any of that.
No.
It's not suitable.
Look, I tell you what.
But also,
Lukashenko.
you may be giving Elizabeth Denham a better bite of the cherry, and I believe in proper representation, including in the Plank of the Week list.
Indeed.
This is what
Brilliant.
the suffragettes fought
This
for.
is exactly what they threw themselves under horses for. Yeah.
Lukashenko is the
Emily Davison will definitely be Plank of the Week.
Yeah. What do you do that for? Why to get the vote? Why? So Gavin Williamson could be in charge of education.
You sort of wonder why they bothered, really, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I'd throw myself under a horse just to get him out, to be honest. You know, and
Yeah.
so I don't want the vote
right.
anymore. Just
Look,
let's not bother.
Lukashenko's the furthest away from home, so I'm willing to withdraw if you would like
Yes.
to.
Well, so make it
although
number
actually
3.
Canada is further away, but anyway, we'll leave
Yeah.
that.
Well, I don't know. You might have to work that one out.
Yeah.
But,
I feel like Gavin is the plank of the week in the sense that it's the
It's
plank
the
we've
story-
been talking
it is the
about.
story of the
but I
week,
don't.
isn't
it?
We shouldn't go for that. I don't know how you normally judge it, but I think like there is some serious plankiness on both sides
Yeah.
that shouldn't be overlooked.
well, I mean, the other way I could sometimes look at it is he's such a plank that he shouldn't win, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that he could come second, even though he's been the biggest plank of the week, he actually comes second. There's
So
a kind of
that
irony to
he
that.
wins absolutely nothing this week.
Right, so he can't even win. He
We've
can't even
downgraded
win.
him.
So he can't even win plank of the week. He's that, he's that bad.
It's like when you come bottom of a quiz, but they give the free bottle of wine to the person at
Yes,
second bottom.
yes, exactly right. All right, well, I think that works then. So we get Elizabeth Denham as number 1,
Yeah.
Gavin Williamson number 2, and Lucky
Lukashenko.
Lukashenko. I can't help but think he sounds like a goalkeeper from like Dynamo Kiev
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the 70s. Lucky Lukashenko,
Or like a
who broke his neck at some
or
point,
like
saving some goal. You know.
a crime boss in GTA 5.
Yeah, not again.
Exactly.
Probably could have been. Yeah.
So there we are. Listen, well done, Elizabeth Denham. You're a long way away, so you won't hear about this for about another 8 hours. But when you do finally pick up the award, well done. Plank of the Week, Information Commissioner has now finally imparted the information that she's working from home in Canada. Fantastic work. Guys, Patrick Christys, thank you very much indeed.
you.
Madeline Grant, well done. We'll see you again same time next week. Don't forget, subscribe to YouTube.